This is the Green Corn Rebellion show, and today I'm here with Aidan Smith, who does what again?
Twitter. Also some electoral analysis stuff.
Ah, okay. He does that. Sorry, sometimes I forget. So, we have a couple of things on the list here to talk about. So, first thing is Bernie dropping out earlier today. Everything okay?
Just very disappointing. I mean, rational given like recent developments. Disappointing more broadly.
Yeah. Because I was at least hoping he would stay in, so we would have, because he at least had a plan for what we should be doing currently during the pandemic, and that was kind of what I was hoping he would at least stay in until June for. It's just like be able to have someone to look at as to, like, for a model as to what we should be doing during this time. And because Biden hasn't really said anything or done anything, and Bernie's just been pretty spectacular when it comes to this. But yeah. So how do you feel about his campaign this time around compared to 2016?
I really don't think I think the two biggest mistakes really were one, just dropping the Bernie would have won argument. That should have been just what he should have just repeated that for 4 years on every news station.
Yeah.
Definitely made the mistake of having like too Twitter-centric a campaign. And when I say that, I don't mean like it's dumb to think that like David Sirota or whatever tweeting too much harmed his campaign. Voters don't give a shit about that. I mean that like his inner circle's use of Twitter kind of meant they misinterpreted the Democratic electorate. Like on Twitter, you'll have like conservative Democrats using really like ridiculously stupid identitarian arguments against Sanders. In reality, like conservative Democrats don't say shit like, I'm not voting for Sanders because he underemphasizes intersectionality or whatever. In reality, like conservative Democrats say shit like, Democrats talk too much about Black Lives Matter and trans rights.
Yeah.
Like they like there is a really like weird like centrists didn't not vote for Sanders because they thought he was overemphasizing white man issues. Centrists vote because they want someone who appeals to white men. Like if Sanders actually made the argument that I'm going to win the Rust Belt, which a lot of people believed, especially in like the Trump transition period in like December 2016, he could have won. But ever like thinking that people gave a shit about Bernie bros or like class reductionists, as if that's why people wouldn't vote for Sanders. You're just a colossal mistake.
But I think he should have been talking about electability more, in terms of we elected a moderate, centrist, whatever you want to call them, Democrat in 2016, and they lost.
Of course.
If I had been the nominee, I probably would have won. The polling was on my side. It wasn't on her side. Even in 2020, the polling was more on Bernie's side in terms of whether or not he could win a general election against Trump, more so than it was even for Biden. It just didn't make any sense to not say that and center that as his argument for electability and make that electability argument more often. I mean, they did try to with the, saying hashtag Bernie beats Trump or whatever and having the bumper stickers, but that's not enough to be able to actually convince people. You actually have to.
Of course.
Like
he had to do that for 4 straight years. The fact he didn't means that he lost. If he had kept on that, like he didn't do that because he knew that like his staff thought like, oh, we can't say that because it would like enrage like Twitter wine mom types. But like he should have done that, obviously. Besides that, though, I mean, like he's also And I don't mean to like be like defeatist, but in general, like compared to like someone like Corbyn who did make massive mistakes, especially like in 2018, like the beginning of 2018 with like Skripalgate. I mean, like really, Sanders ran and did well for his identified socialist running without any institutional backing. And I don't even mean that in like the sense that we shouldn't reflect on the campaign failures. But I mean, I do think that like a lot of it was just completely outside of his control. That's just sort of what happened. You don't win in this country with like that socialist tradition effectively died like 80 years ago.
Yeah. But no, and if we're gonna talk about Corbyn, like Corbyn, he made a lot more mistakes probably than Bernie did within the last 4 to 5 years, if we want to compare it that way. But also, I think the media itself is different, kind of in the UK than it is here. So here in America, like we have our mainstream media, and it's mostly older people who watch it. In our country, mostly older voters vote, and they watch that. But we also have, most people under 45, or at least under 40, they don't watch that stuff. They watch stuff. They listen to podcasts. They listen to YouTube, and there's a lot more of a independent leftist mediascape here in America that was able to, push Bernie than there is in the UK to push Corbyn, which is kind of odd because in the UK, Corbyn technically got the nomination because he was leader for 5 years, and Bernie was unable to get the nomination. But Corbyn's time as leader was a lot difficult because the media was just way, 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 way more harsh on him, and he had less allies within any kind of media landscape in the UK. So I feel like for them, it's a little bit different, but it's in some ways you can look at both and say both had made some mistakes, but the media landscape I feel like is also different.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And I think that is like the main issue. I do think there's like a tendency kind of to like of the Sanders campaign and like related forces to kind of like basically fetishize grassroots politics. There's obviously a major place for canvassing, especially for local races. But like the fact of the matter is, if you have to run for president, you have to use traditional campaign techniques. Like the reason people do campaign ads and shit is because it actually works. And of course, Sanders leaned into that somewhat, but there was always kind of like too much of a fetishization of revolution, and that's kind of a problem with like new left types since the 60s anyway. But yeah, like Sanders has always been, or for the past 5 years, he's been popular with registered Democrats. He should have worked to like more to get the votes of already existing registered Democrats instead of bank on like an unprecedented turnout surge of young voters and like other marginalized groups, Muslims, etc. And to be fair, like it's not to say these didn't pay any dividends. He still did absurdly good by the context of what a democratic socialist would do in American politics. So I don't even think it should be scoffed at in any sense. But when it comes to like actually building a majoritarian like coalition, he should have leaned more into kind of like normie campaign techniques.
Yeah, I agree with that too. And the ads this time around were not as effective as the ads in 2016, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
And yeah, I agree. His favorability rating within the Democratic Party is higher than most of the people who ran. I mean, his name recognition was higher than pretty much everyone else's. His popularity was, and he should have also made that part of his electability, because a lot of these people they make that they say, oh well, the base of the Democratic Party, blah blah blah, is supporting Biden, and it's like, yeah, but they also like Bernie more. He should have made that a part of his electability argument too, because I was telling people especially after Super Tuesday when Bernie lost most of those states, I was telling people, I said, Bernie's not losing because he's unpopular with Democrats or because his ideas are unpopular with Democrats. It's because the media has been pushing this Joe Biden's the most electable candidate thing for the last year, regardless of how, that might look whenever you see him speak. Because clearly, if you look at Joe Biden speak, he doesn't look too good at all.
Yeah.
But that was really what it was that electability. We underestimated Democrats and their willingness to want to get Trump out of office by any means necessary. And I think that's what Bernie's campaign did. I don't think it was necessarily that they focused too much on policy, because the policy is good. I think Democrats, or at least there's a certain part of the Democratic base that does care about policy. Because that's why you did see Warren get a bump whenever she started pushing out policies sometime last year. And then, so yeah, I think it really did come down to his perceived electability was what it was. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, I mean, in general, kind of like the left, it's really tempting, especially because like the left tends to lean or skew very young. It's kind of tempting to say like no one watches cable news anymore. Not only do they do, and it's disproportionately older people who are disproportionately powerful in American politics, not just because they vote in higher numbers, but because like America's a really fucking old country. Like we have a very high median age. As is most of the developed world at this point. But yeah, you kind of have to play carrot and stick with the media. Like as someone who loves AOC, I think there's a lot of reasons to be skeptical for obvious reasons. Most of them just completely unfair, and the fact that she's Hispanic and a woman, to think that she might not have the same appeal as a future presidential candidate than Bernie. But I do think the one thing she does really right is she knows how to play carrot and stick with the liberal media. That could easily change if she ever looks like she could achieve power. But I mean, like, the fact of the matter is, and it's awful, is that Rachel Maddow is more powerful than any Democratic politician. And that's just a fact. Rachel Maddow, if Maddow endorsed Biden in fucking November, the race would have just been over. Biden would have won 50 states in the primary. I mean, that's hyperbolic, but you get my point. You have to play carrot and stick with these people until hopefully in 20 years, old cable media will be dead. But that's not the reality now, and it's not even the reality anytime soon. So yeah, that's something I do appreciate, is like AOC's media media outreach is something that's just really beyond unfortunately necessary, especially because like running against, like, this is one of the issues. Running hard against the media is something that's really appealing in a general election because for completely legitimate reasons. But you can't do that in the Democratic primary, both because MSNBC is incredibly powerful within it, just because of pure viewership reasons, but also because, especially in the Trump era, there's like an ideological preclination by Democratic voters to think mainstream media equals good because evil orange man is anti-media. So yeah, media's done. And it's really clear now, like in retrospect, like the fake news moral scare around social media was basically, if not, I'm not really suggesting any conspiracy here of how it arose, because I mean, it was to some extent legitimate. It was pretty obvious that like the social media fake news moral scare is fucking ridiculous. It's not even remotely close to as harmful as like what cable news does. The cable news, it's funny how like and Felix from Chapo articulated this. I've had this for like a while, but he accurately described it as like, yeah, there was a huge moral scare around Facebook not taking down like posts that say like Hillary is like Hitler's granddaughter or whatever on conservative parts of Facebook. That's nowhere even remotely as harmful as what cable news has done to this country, not just in like the past 30 years when they really saw like the rise of like partisan cable news, but specifically in the last few years, both in the 2016 campaign and beyond. So yeah, like it's unfortunately you can't really run against the media quite yet. Yeah, so that sucks. Addition to that, yeah, I mean that's really it. He should have stressed electability more. He should have not ever got the idea that conservative Democrats were like weird like identitarian types. That's not the case at all. Like people who are conservative Democrats don't like black people. Like the average white man who calls himself a conservative Democrat isn't some guy who has like a pink pussy hat on and says like I would vote for Bernie, but Medicare for all is gonna kill black people, or whatever the fuck
Yeah.
kind of weird like identitarian argument you hear on Twitter. That person, the guy who's like 50 something and calls himself like a moderate, if you talk to them, they'll say, yeah, Democrats are losing because they talk too much about trans rights or Black Lives Matter. They won't necessarily or even likely disavow them, but they'll say that, oh, these issues are hurting us in the Rust Belt. And their antidote to that would be going centrist on economics because they have very like 90s view about these things. So yeah, it was dumb. Like centrist types are not fucking identitarian. It's a completely bizarre Twitter like insular cult. Like Hillary's weird. It's really like Hillary's kind of like obtuse messaging around this. When she was like breaking up the banks isn't going to save police.
Solve racism, or
Yeah,
it was
like
solve racism. That's what it was.
yeah, or was it solve racism, or it was like
solve racism,
okay,
something like that's what
yeah,
it
because
was.
she said yeah, and I think at another time she said like banks aren't the ones killing unarmed black men.
Yeah,
Like when we hear stuff like that, that's to us like leftists interested in politics. That's the most irritating shit ever. Like not just because like that's obviously positioning economic and social like racial justice as being positioned against each other, which they're not. It's also the fact that like Hillary Clinton is not an enemy of militarization of police. She's actually a proponent of it, and Sanders isn't. The thing though is that like that argument didn't actually work. Like people did not vote for Hillary because they heard that shit in 2016. Like we were really rightfully annoyed with it. But Sanders didn't in reality have to respond to like something that fucking obtuse. Like I think Sanders interpreted the types of groups he lost in 2016. He was like, oh yeah, that line of argument that economic justice is racist really worked. Like no, it actually didn't. We should have just ignored it. That's really fucking stupid. No one heard it and actually agreed with it. They just spent too much time on Twitter thinking that like the average centrist Democrat is like near a tangent or something. In reality, like the average centrist Democrat is like 55, has some kind of like I mean it depends on what area they're from, but usually no, they're not particularly socially liberal. You're not going to talk to some centrist Democrat who opposes Bernie because they think because Rogan endorsed him. Like it's really fucking stupid. That's obviously not the case. But yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I mean that's basically the end of my thoughts on that matter.
Yeah. The other day you tweeted asking about numbers for who young people voted for in the 92 primary. Did you find anything on that?
No, I didn't. Unfortunately, it's really difficult. I was actually asking some people because I'm trying to write a piece at the moment about that. As far as I can tell, it looks like there's anecdotal data that Jerry Brown did well on college campuses. That's not a meaningful statistic. 1988. I'd be more interested in 1988 because I really want to know what Jesse Jackson's actual base was. Yes, I literally have no idea what happened there. I don't know if Jesse Jackson overperformed among young voters because he got like, what did he lose by in the popular vote? He got like lost by 12 percentage points in 88 to
something like that.
Yeah, very impressive.
Yeah, like it was like because Jesse Jackson ran twice. He won in 84 and then in 88, and he did better in 88 because he won. Correct. He won quite a few southern states.
And he won Michigan.
Yeah, and I think that was due to the black population in those states. And then
Michigan.
Yeah.
Michigan's a very weird state as a primary state. Like, a lot of people were shocked when Bernie won it in 2016, understandably so. But like, Michigan in Democratic primaries has always been really fucking weird. Like in 1972, ironically, the exact same thing happened, where a candidate swept only a few southern states plus Michigan in 72. But it wasn't Jesse Jackson, it was fucking George Wallace.
Yeah.
For exactly opposite reasons. George Wallace's 1972 campaign's really fascinating. I don't want to get on don't want to get off topic, but there's something very fascinating about Wallace's campaign. We really think about Wallace in terms of a 1960s lens, since that was the height of his prominence. He broke with the Democratic Party in 68, obviously, to run a third-party segregationist campaign, which disturbingly actually helped Humphrey. If he didn't run, like, Nixon would have won by an even larger margin. But when he ran in 72 and he rejoined the Democratic Party, he rebranded himself once again. He kind of ran as, like, a vaguely populistic type. He was actually winning blue-collar white voters in the North. He was winning auto workers in Michigan. Not a single fucking auto worker voted for George Wallace in 1968. The only people who voted for Wallace in 68 were like literal segregationists in Alabama. He kind of expanded his appeal in a very weird pivot. And of course, like, Wallace, I don't know how familiar you are with his.
I'm a little bit. Like, the third time he ran for governor, he disavowed. Well, I think this is after 72, but it was third time he ran for governor. He disavowed all the racist stuff.
Oh yeah, he did.
Yeah.
I might be getting the exact years wrong, but when he ran for governor in 58, back when Alabama was a solid blue state,
he got endorsed by the NAACP the first time he ran.
Yeah, and I believe the ACLU. So he ran as the liberal, the racial liberal in that campaign. Just one of the most grotesque political opportunists in, like, American political history, but, like, really a fascinating one. And I think people should analyze his 72 campaign. Another campaign to analyze more is, are you familiar with Jerry Brown's 92 campaign?
I'm not, no. I mean, I'm aware that he ran, but I'm not familiar with this campaign specifically.
Yeah, I mean, like, that was the third time Brown ran. He first became governor in 74, and from there he was super young. I'm sure you've heard Governor Moonbeam. He was very much like a socially liberal, but still very much like a new Democrat. So when he ran in 76 and 1980, he was kind of seen as the future of the party. Here's what's weird about it. When he ran in 92, it was completely different, because in the 80s, he had lost in 86 for Senate when he ran for Senate in California. So by then he was totally washed up. If you look at pictures of him from 92 versus 1980, he goes from, like, this young looking guy to being, like, completely bald, just aged enormously in such a short amount of time. So when he ran in 1992, he was the equivalent of someone absurdly washed up running for president now. It's like if Howard Dean ran in 2020 and actually managed to win 10 states or so. Brown's campaign in 1992 was just really fucking weird, because he objectively had no right getting even, like, 0.1% of the vote, but he was actually managed to be sort of viable. And when he ran for the nomination that time around, he ran the campaign weirdly enough, because we think of, like, Brown as, like, an establishment stickler. His campaign was the closest thing to Andrew Yang we saw before Yang, and I include that with Sanders in 16. When Brown ran, he did the first ever grassroots funding campaign. He bought a toll number where you could call Jerry Brown, and he'd tell you his stances on the issues. Brown's platform was just hysterically fucking stupid. It was like he wanted to, like, have a flat tax. I think he wanted to abolish the income tax. He wanted to gut the Department of Education, but also create single-payer healthcare. Something really eclectic and stupid, but exactly like what you'd hear out of Yang. But yeah, he actually, like, managed to do absurdly well for someone who was just by then just a completely washed up has-been. And the fact he actually looked for a moment that he could win the nomination, like, that's crazy. And are you familiar with Paul Tsongas?
Yes.
Paul Tsongas was the most conservative Democrat in that race. I think what a lot of people forget is Bill Clinton arguably was the most liberal out of Jerry Brown and Paul Tsongas. Tsongas literally ran as, like, when Tsongas was running, he used just the most generic Republican quotes. He was literally saying stuff like, government and efficiency are antonyms. And I remember he went to an ADA meeting, not Americans with Disabilities Act, but it was the Americans for Democratic something. It's basically the equivalent of like our revolution, but for like the 20th century. He went there and said that like income redistribution is bad and that we should only focus on economic growth. Something not even like Bill Clinton at any time would say something that like that. So Tsongas was actually endorsed by Mitt Romney. Like Mitt Romney became a Democrat for that year just to vote for Tsongas. Tsongas died a few years later in like 96. But at another time, because like the whole field was empty, Mario Cuomo didn't run Mario Cuomo would have cleaned it up, but he didn't want to run because everyone thought they'd lose to H.W. Bush. So for a time, like Bill Clinton at the time was an A-lister. He was keynote in '88. He was a big profile nationally. But like people like Jerry Brown and Paul Tsongas were just fucking like clowns. They would not have done anywhere even remotely near as good if anyone else but Bill Clinton, who was like a serious candidate, would have run. So that's an interesting race worth analyzing. And that's why I want to get concrete data on the youth vote there.
All right.
Next, just asking what the next topic is, labor.
Yeah, the UK Labour leadership election. The results came out a few days ago. Who was it? The one? Keir Starmer. He ended up winning with 52% of the vote. And the socialist, Rebecca Long Bailey, she got 27%. And Lisa Nandy, I can't remember how much she got. It was like 11%, something like that. Yeah, so what are your thoughts on that?
I'm a big fan of labor Kremlinology. I really like learning about like labor sectarianism. I'm fine with Starmer. I mean, I just think the case of Corbyn is just the greatest tragedy of modern times when it comes to and I think he's more unfairly treated by media than any other politician in modern political history. I mean that including every major country and every democratic country. I cannot think of anyone. He makes Ocasio-Cortez's or Sanders' media treatment in America look fair. He looks, I don't know, fucking Rahul Gandhi, who's adult, but I mean, even he is just mocked mercilessly for being like baby-faced in like Indian media. There's no comparison to the way that like this man, just someone who has never had, just like the purest of people, someone with the demeanor of a retired geography teacher, someone who has obviously no interest in power and purely wants to be in politics for the good of others. The fact they managed to cast this person as Hitler, it will continue to baffle the mind how many people believe that. And it was really tragic to think like in July 2017, like a month after the 2017 GE, he had like a favorability rating of +2. And like the fact that it's just beyond tragic. And if the campaign in 2017 went on another 2 weeks, Grenfell would have happened in the campaign and he would be prime minister. Or if just 10 seats, like Amber Rudd's seat in the Hastings and Rye, if he gained another 10 seats or so for, let's say, like an overall net gain of 40 seats instead of about 30 that he gained, May's coalition could have came apart a lot faster, and he would have been prime minister. And it just really is tragic. And for the record, I don't even think he necessarily would have been a great prime minister. I don't think I think he easily could have ended up being kind of like Francois Hollande, not on his own accord, but just for circumstantial reasons. Just anyone dealing with the formalization of Brexit as a Labour prime minister, they probably would have had an absurdly stressful job. So he could have easily failed as prime minister. John McDonnell could have ended up as Philip Snowden, who he was the first Labour chancellor under Ramsay MacDonald in the first Labour ministry. So I don't know. It just really is like a major tragedy of modern times. As for the Labor leadership election, I mean, I would have voted for Nandy in the first round, and probably Starmer in the second round. I'm very like, I mean, there's the obvious flaw of Starmer being a London liberal. On the other hand, though, like, there's plenty of cases of like posh upper class British people winning the votes of working class Britons in the North, however defined. I don't know. It's really tragic, and I'm never really going to forgive the Labour right for just sabotaging Corbyn and his faction got control of the National Executive Committee and wielded all of the party's organs, which he didn't have in 2017. But I mean, I don't really see any alternative other than Starmer being leader. I'm mostly satisfied with the shadow cabinet. I guess it's still by far the most left-wing shadow cabinet since Corbyn. Like, even like, we can compare Starmer to Miliband, obviously, for very obvious reasons. They're both soft left politicians. But I mean, like, Miliband had Ed Balls as fucking shadow chancellor, who is in pretty like standard 2000s Blairite.
Yeah.
Starmer's shadow chancellor is Annalise Dodds. She's weirdly similar to Elizabeth Warren in a way that I can literally not think of any other Labour politician as being. She's sophomore MP. She won in 2017 in Oxford East for the first time. She was an MEP before that. She was a public policy lecturer at Oxford. It's a very strange academic background that is not shared by any other Labour politician, really. She's really the only one comparable to Warren. But yeah, I mean, like, Starmer's shadow cabinet's pretty good. I mean, if he wins in 2024, he'll almost certainly be the best he'll be the best prime minister since Attlee. That's obviously not very much competition in that regard. Yeah. But I mean, I'm not despairing over his win in the least. There's reasons to be disappointed, just because I feel just like my hope for politics is just kind of like forever being cast away, seeing what happened with Corbyn and to a lesser extent Sanders. But I mean, like, the situation isn't nearly as dire as in America. Keir Starmer's government would be astronomically better than like any Democratic administration other than a Sanders or Warren one, I guess. I like Rebecca Long Bailey. I really hate to say this, but I mean, like, in effect, her campaign was just kind of an empty vassal for the left wing of the Labour Party. If stood instead of Long Bailey, which would have made more sense, because like Rayner is clearly the more developed politician in terms of like public outreach and policy wise. I mean, Rayner might have actually been able to like hold Starmer to a lower margin, but I mean, like, whatever. I trust Labour more as an institution than the Democratic Party. I mean, like, the fact like Tony Blair is an absolutely reprehensible person in a way that's really emblematic of him as opposed to like his faction as a whole, because there are plenty of fine people like Robin Cook, like Blair's first foreign secretary, was very honorable. The thing about Tony Blair is he's an absurdly terrible person by like any account, just absolutely absurdly greedy. But in terms of domestic policy, I mean, like, he was far better. He was not Tory light in the same way that like Bill Clinton was Republican light. Like, under Blair, especially for his first term in office, you did see a minimum wage increase. You did see increased funding all across the board. It was really only in his second term where he got kind of, him and Frank Field, who is the labor minister, they started flirting with some like austere provisions to the NHS. But like, basically what I'm saying is I trust Labour as an institution way more than the Democratic Party, even if they do have a right-wing leader, which I wouldn't even call Starmer. But like, Blair's main issue was fucking foreign policy, and that was 20 years ago. Now the UK is an irrelevant global force. It doesn't fucking matter what would happen if they decided to back the US on some military venture. It's not the same international power as it was 20 years ago or a decade ago. So now that only domestic policy matters, I'm basically fine with it. Yeah, so I mean, I'm not despairing over that. Also, like in 2019, the left of the Labour Party was so much more successful in parliamentary selection. So there's so many vastly more left-wing Labour MPs than there was in 2017. I'm looking forward to Sam Tari. Sam Tari was coordinator for Momentum from the start. He was very early on in aid to Corbyn. He was almost selected for a seat in 2017, but back then there was literally only one Corbyn-aligned figure selected for a safe seat. But now he's in Parliament this time, so I'm looking forward to his career. I mean, in 10 years, I'd be happy if he became leader. But yeah, point is, I'm fine with it. It's definitely a much less threatening situation than the Democratic Party at the moment.
Yeah, I'd say about the same because, yeah, I was hoping that Rebecca won. I was really very hopeful. I mean, I wasn't hopeful that she would end up winning because it didn't really look like she had the same energy or momentum that Corbyn did whenever he ran in 2015.
Uh-huh.
And I'm not as afraid of Keir Starmer being leader. Like, it looks like he's going to be willing to include the left flank of the party on things.
Yeah.
And he's not gonna, just swing the party completely back over to the right. Because I mean, unlike most Democrats here in America, he at least has a notion of what's going on and can see that the left is very much needed in order to keep, the several million voters that Corbyn ended up getting in 2017 and in 2019 that they didn't get in 2015 or in 2010. So he at least has an understanding of that. Unlike Democrats here in America, they don't have that understanding at all, that they actually need to be more left in order to win, in order to get young voters and working class voters. So I'm wanting to see how he handles the pandemic right now. I'm also curious to see how the media treats him, because the media there is horrible to any Labour leader, although they've been the worst to Corbyn. I feel like they're going to be okay with him for now, because it sounds like they're kind of being nice to him because they kind of have to be.
Yeah.
But I'm sure after the pandemic is over and they're in normal opposition and there's not, coronavirus about to kill everybody, they're probably going to start digging into him a little bit. I don't know if they'll go as hard as they went on him as they did with Corbyn.
It'll probably just not be as effective. But I mean, they'll try at some point.
Because he seemed, once again with him, kind of the same way with Joe Biden, there's this whole theory about him that supposedly he's more electable or is seen as more prime ministerial than Corbyn was. So
I think there's far more truth to that than with Biden. I mean, like, Rebecca Long Bailey isn't even known by the median British person, but her favorabilities are like already far underwater.
Yeah.
I mean, I like Long Bailey. I'd be happy to see her as leader in the future. But I mean, there at least is like quantitative evidence to suggest that Starmer is the most electable. His obvious Londonness and all, compared to like Bernie and Biden, both always polling around the same versus Trump.
Yeah.
The thing about Boris Johnson is, just for purely things out of his control, I mean, Boris Johnson's probably the least bad among horrible prime ministers the Tory party has produced since, like, I mean, Boris Johnson has not been, obviously he's been in there for less than a year. He hasn't been nearly as catastrophic as fucking
David Cameron.
Yeah, David Cameron is the worst Tory prime minister post-war besides Thatcher. I don't give a shit. Like, I can't believe people are still sticking to like this interpretation of him as some kind of like liberal. When Cameron was running in 2010, Sure, he moved left on stuff like gay marriage, but he ran harder to the right on immigration than even Johnson did in 2019. Cameron destroyed the social safety net in Britain more so than anyone but Thatcher. I mean, like I have a lower opinion of Cameron than May, Major, or Johnson. Johnson's the least terrible. I mean, he's a repugnant person, and he has the potential to be like do catastrophic damage given the size of his majority, which is of course built on sand. But for the next 5 years, him and his party have free will to do what they want. But I mean, any of his successors, like Dominic Raab or whatever, would be far worse. I do think there's something really hysterical about the way the media is covering Johnson's obvious, extremely serious like health emergency. The fact they're like just doing, I mean, like we're used to the British press just being the arm of like the PR arm of the Tory party, but like I think there is something uniquely hilarious about the way they're talking about Johnson's hospitalization. Like when they talk about just for example, like Downing Street said Mr. Johnson was in good spirits as he continued to receive standard oxygen treatment. He was breathing without any assistance, such as mechanical blah, blah, blah. Okay, if he's on oxygen, by definition, he's not breathing without any assistance. It's insane they're still trying to, like, do these surreal attempts to spin, like, a lethal health emergency. I also really thought it was fucking hilarious when Sunak, the chancellor, was giving like press reports on Johnson's condition, as if like he as chancellor is like the fucking press secretary for him. Like it was very weird seeing like the chancellor of the exchequer give like reports to the media on the prime minister's health condition. Like that's not his fucking job. He's not like some personal aide to him. Like he's responsible for the budget. So that was really strange. Yeah, I mean, Johnson's a repugnant person in every way.
But yeah,
just a really absurd spectacle all around.
Yeah, what I was about to say. But yeah, the Tory party, and that's the other thing is the size of the party, the Labour Party under Corbyn, it like tripled, like
exploded.
Yeah, and it still hasn't decreased at all. I think it decreased a little bit last year, somewhat. But then the Tory party, it's like 100,000 people in it.
Yeah,
and it's still like it's something interesting to watch. But that's pretty much all I have to say about that. So, how are you feeling about the coronavirus and how it's being handled here in America?
I mean, there's no people are trying to dance around it, but I mean, there's no room there. I mean, it's not even up for debate that, and it hasn't been for at least 2 weeks, that the U.S. is going to be destroyed by it far more so than any other developed country. It's crazy how people are dancing around this obvious reality, just beyond catastrophic. Like even as someone like obviously deeply cynical about the American healthcare system, even I expected that, like, in a fucking global pandemic, they'd actually test people for the disease. Like, I genuinely cannot believe we're basically not doing that unless you're, like, an NBA player. It's going to be catastrophic. I can't even imagine when things will be back to normal. I think the most grotesque spectacle was like the media in February trying to convince us that masks weren't necessary. And it turns out they were just doing that because like we have a limited supply of masks because the Chamber of Commerce convinced Trump not to invoke the Defense Production Act to create more. So they just lied. The media just coordinated a lie, the tier of like the Saddam weapons of mass destruction lie, so that like the Pentagon wouldn't be forced to like create more masks. Like it's fucking disgusting. So many people are just going to get it a second time when the next spate of coronavirus spreads around. People are gonna get lung damage. It's fucking absurd that like look, I get why public health agencies kind of had to downplay it in the beginning and say like you're mostly only at risk if you're 70 or you have serious pre-existing conditions. I get why they kind of have to tell a white lie about that just for purely very unfortunate scarcity reasons, so that it would prevent people from going into all-out fucking panic and buying every mask in the country, which they did anyway, so it was futile. But the fact they're still pulling this shit as if it's very obvious you are not safe, even if you're young and have no pre-existing conditions. All evidence, I mean, it's preliminary, but it's pretty clear you're going to have like catastrophic lung damage, even if you are very young and healthy. The other thing is, like, America has like a fucking third world tier healthcare system. How are poor people, like, how is the median poor person in their 20s supposed to know that they have pre-existing conditions in the first place? If you're like a poor person in the Mississippi Delta who's gone to underfunded public schools your whole life and now work for like $3 an hour at a fast food chain for 60 hours a week, you probably have not gone to the doctor except for purely transactional reasons, so that every 5 years you can get like a meningitis shot so you can go to public school. The average poor, especially like a poor black person in the South, they have probably not received anything even resembling like quality medical examination, anything other than the most basic of physicals. People in America don't fucking know if they have pre-existing conditions if you're poor. Like, even in plenty of wealthier, even in plenty of countries with much better health systems, they won't know, but especially not here. I mean, that's just fucking meaningless. So yeah, it's going to be catastrophic. Really terrified for people. I mean, I've been lucky. Like, I don't know anyone who's gotten it. California is actually handling it pretty spectacularly well compared to the rest of the US, given like our massive size. So I'm.
But yeah,
it's scary.
Yeah, definitely don't like the way Trump's handling it. That's probably, I would say, maybe the worst of it. Here in Oklahoma, our governor and lieutenant governor, it's absolute fucking disaster.
I'm sure.
Yeah, like he's like there was a ballot petition to get Medicaid expansion put on the ballot for a state question, which is something we definitely need now, because he won't accept the Medicaid expansion money, still won't. And he hasn't decided what day we're going to be voting on that. So we don't know if it's going to be on the ballot in June. We don't know if it's going to be on the ballot in November. We don't know if it's going to be ballot in August. We don't know. He hasn't given a stay-at-home order. To the extent he's given anything like that, he's basically just told people who are high risk to stay home. Some towns here in... Oh, and on top of that, the week, I want to say it was the week of or the week after, the basketball players here tested positive for it at that game. He posted a picture of himself and his family on Twitter eating at a restaurant, and he had to delete the tweet because people were ratioing him. And what else? Our lieutenant governor, he went to Florida for spring break. So, yeah. And so these people are not just trying to get all of us killed, they're trying to get themselves killed.
Yeah.
So that's like I feel like Oklahoma, and they've written articles about this. Oklahoma's pretty much handled this in the worst possible scenario than every other state. And there's some towns here that have handled it pretty well. Like my town, I think about almost 2 or 3 weeks ago, the mayor, he said everyone stay home. All the businesses except for the restaurants and the grocery stores closed down. The city of Norman, which is where OU's at, it's south of Oklahoma City. Bria Clark, had her on my show a few weeks ago. She's handled this probably the best of any of the mayors here. And she shut everything down weeks ago, and implemented social distancing and all that good stuff. So she's taken it seriously more so than everyone else. And to the extent that whenever I had her on my show a few weeks ago, she was called on to Ari Melber's show on MSNBC to talk about how she's handled it and whatnot. So I thought it was pretty cool. And then in Oklahoma City, how did he handle it? In Oklahoma City, the mayor of Oklahoma City, he also posted a picture of himself eating out the same night as the governor did. I want to say it was like the same night or the same day. And he kept his picture up, but it was still ridiculous. And he kind of dragged his feet on getting everyone to shelter in place and whatnot. But it's not good. It's not good at all. And then we're one of those states where like 10, 12 of our hospitals have closed down within the last 10 years in the rural areas. So it's going to be like, it's been a slow spread in the rural areas. Like in my county, I think we have like 5, 10 cases, something like that. We have a hospital in Shawnee, but when you start going further out in Oklahoma, you don't have very many hospitals, and you don't know who has it out there. And we have 1,500 cases now, which doesn't sound as bad as a place like New York, but it's still bad for Oklahoma. And but yeah, it's pretty scary. That's kind of the reason why I wanted Bernie to stay in, so he could at least have a person that's repeating the actual talking points of what we do need to be doing in this kind of a situation. Because I definitely don't think this pandemic is going to be over in a month or two.
Fuck no.
Like, whoever's thinking that is just like completely insane. Like, I remember, what was it? Bill Gates saw this article that said Bill Gates said it will be over by the summer or by the fall. I was like, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about.
2021, maybe.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I was like, no, this is gonna be over until like next year sometime. Like, they're not even gonna have a vaccine until at least a year from now. Like, that's it's completely insane. Like, I'm glad that they shut. Like, one of the other smarter things that I'm glad our state did, our superintendent, she shut down all the schools in the state. I know some states, they were kind of slow on that, but she shut them down for the rest of the year at least. I don't know what's going to happen next year, but but yeah, but no, like, this isn't going to be over in a couple of weeks or a couple of months. Like, I don't even, like, people are hypothesizing that it'll slow down in the summer, like maybe, but I still think
totally, people were saying that. People like, some legitimate people like theorized on that in January, but I mean that's pretty obviously not going to be true. Like, there's no evidence given, like we see what's happening in southern hemisphere countries. It's not the case at all. It doesn't fucking evaporate in summer. It doesn't. I feel like they think heat will melt the virus. It's totally fucking ascientific. That's not why there's less flu in the summer. Like, there's it's totally ridiculous. It's such a fucking nightmare. As someone, like, I've made fun of like germaphobes my whole life, but like, I can't imagine I'm ever going to mentally adjust away from this. I'm always going to be terrified of going outside. I'm really worried I'll get fucking, I don't know, Ebola or whatever. Yeah, like, I'm going to be very cognizant of pathogens now at all times. So I'm not looking forward to like the psychological toll of this either. But yeah, just horrifying nightmare.
Yeah, I mean, I was about to say that, like, the last time we had any kind of pandemic similar to this, which is, you can't really call it similar to this because this is way worse, was H1N1 back in 2009 or 2010. That was like the only time I ever remember like an actual pandemic here in America where it killed like 1,000 people, something like that. And that was the only time I ever remember being afraid that I might get something.
Yeah.
And I was looking up the numbers on that, and like about a week ago, and I was showing a friend. I was like, "Hey, remember this? This only killed like 1,000 people in America, and like 10,000 people got it. This is way worse than that." But yeah, and then I remember Ebola. I remember the Ebola coverage. I felt like was kind of like hyperbolic at the time. Like, I remember
Ebola's the thing.
Yeah. Like, I remember it was 2014, and I make this joke a lot that in 2014, if you turned on CNN, if Ebola didn't kill you, ISIS was going to kill you. Because I remember
Yeah.
that was like at the same time, like people were talking about the same things. But no, like the Ebola coverage was like way blown out. They were talking about it all the
Of course.
time. And I mean, it
Ebola
was,
is
yeah, go ahead.
Ebola isn't virulent. Like Ebola is not a fucking threat. It's not a virulent disease. If you get Ebola, you know within a day, and you die within a week. There's like a 90% fatality rate. Like diseases have to have much longer incubation periods of not noticing it. Like a disease where you feel like you're going to die after a day and can only be transmitted via like bodily fluids is not even remote, is not something that causes a pandemic. The coronavirus is terrifying because it's absurdly virulent because of how long the incubation period and how easy it is to spread. Like Ebola was never a threat to the fucking US. It was never going to like the coverage surrounding it was fucking insane. I mean, Ebola is a monstrously horrifying disease,
Yeah,
but it's not something that's going to ever like it's going to like it's not going to like cause a pandemic. It's not the type of disease that does that.
Yeah. But I remember the Ebola coverage was pretty wild.
I do too. Yeah.
Yeah,
It was
like,
a big issue in the 2014 midterms for some reason.
yeah. But the coronavirus, this is like, and that was the other part, was that it was a whole period of time. Another reason why I kind of hope Bernie stayed in, even though he didn't really have a chance to win, was kind of to go on a "I told you so" tour.
Yeah.
So, like, because everything that we're seeing currently right now is, just emblematic of how bad capitalism is.
Mm-hmm.
People are instantly out of work,
Yeah.
and whatever benefits that they're going to get is not going to be sufficient enough compared to the job that they actually had. Then this stimulus bill that they passed is just atrocious. Like, it's a joke. The $1,200 for each person, and technically not each person's getting it. And then on top of that, it's not going to be anyone. No, not very many people are going to get it like in a couple of weeks. It'll be months from now. Like, that's not at
Yeah.
all. Like, people are going to die simply because they are not going to be able to have money. Like,
Yeah.
screw coronavirus. Like, if they're not going to pass something that's actually going to give people like $2,000 or $3,000 each month, people are gonna just die simply because they don't have food or water or rent to be able to keep living.
Yeah.
Like, I just can't even wrap my head around that.
Mm-hmm.
You have something else to add?
No, I mean I think that's pretty conclusive on COVID. It's really just a nightmare that people still aren't seeming to comprehend, even though we're all locked in.
Yeah. Well, some of us are locked in. I was out in town
That's true.
once last week. Like, I was out in town once last week, and I went out for two reasons. I think I went to go to Walmart in Homeland to see if they had like some disinfectant wipes and something. And then I was gonna see what the gas prices were in town, because the gas prices are like low. So I wanted to see that. And plenty of people were out. It was like almost as if
Jesus.
not worse than a regular day. Like, it was like Walmart's never been more packed in my hometown than I've ever seen it in the last few weeks, last month or so.
Yeah,
and that was pretty shocking to me. Go ahead. What were you about to say?
Yeah, I've left the house, I think thrice in the last 4 weeks, purely just to go like once a week. I've gone to In-N-Out just to go to the drive-through, so I'm not touching anything, which is it's whatever. I mean, it's like probably not even good to be out, but I mean that's basically as low risk of an out activity as you can go. Besides that, I've taken every precaution, so I've been responsible with regards to this. Yeah, it's just really fucking surreal. I don't think people are really grasping the full like surreality of the present moment.
Yeah, and then when it gets really, really bad, like, I know that some hospitals, I can't remember where it was, they're already reaching capacity, and it's like in urban areas. And I hope it doesn't get as bad in the rural areas as I think it's going to get.
Uh-huh.
Because, in the rural areas, it's more likely to spread a lot less quickly than it would in an urban area. But if it does actually get to spread very quickly in some of these areas where these hospitals are non-existent, where you have to go 2 hours out just to get to a hospital, it's going to be total bloodbath in some of these
Mm-hmm.
places. But yeah, last topic I have here is music. What have you been listening to?
Been listening to a lot of Pop Smoke posthumously. Very unfortunate death. Probably the saddest rap death in recent times. Like I think it's more of a loss to music than like Little Peep's death or XX Extentacion's death or Juice WRLD's death. Yeah, I don't really know who will. I was enjoying New York Drill. I was liking the new snare pattern. It was very refreshing from kind of like the 2 and 6 like trap pattern where it's like usually the clap or the snare is on the 2 or 6 bar. Yeah, it's very unfortunate. See, I've just been listening to his limited discography. I've been listening to less music in general because I'm sedentary now. Like I don't. Same with podcasts. Like I haven't been listening to much things because I usually would listen to it like while walking.
Yeah.
What about you?
For me, I've been listening. It's kind of on and off for me. Like some days I won't listen to music, some days I will.
Yeah,
But
same.
usually I've been listening to Sirius XM, they're letting people listen to their stuff for free until May. So I've been listening to a little bit of Sirius XM, Octane, Liquid Metal, and Turbo, which is like their Octane's the new hard rock station, and Liquid Metal's the heavy metal station, and then Turbo is the 2000s and 90s hard rock and heavy metal station. So I've been listening to that because I used to have Sirius XM on Dish Network whenever I was in high school. So it's kind of a nostalgic thing for me to be able to listen to that stuff again. I've also been listening to specific artists. I've been listening to a little bit of 3 Days Grace, their newer albums that have come out the last couple of years with their new singer. And who else? This band called Fever 333. They're like a new age Rage Against the Machine. So they're really good. What else?
What streaming service do you use?
Usually Apple Music. I use Apple Music for a little bit of I Prevail. They're this band. They're like a new metal band. Like they're a new metal band who's like influenced by metalcore. They kind of sound like Linkin Park, but if Linkin Park did like metalcore. So that's really interesting. Been listening to Seether a little bit. Band called Knocked Loose is like a heavy hardcore band from California. I think they're from California. But yeah, and then podcasts. As far as podcasts go, I've been listening to a little bit less actually. I'm not quite sure how that is. Yeah, like because I usually listen whenever I go to school. I'm not going to school anymore. I just stay home. So I mean, I kind of get bored with podcasts occasionally. I've literally sat through half a podcast and just got bored halfway through. Just like I'm gonna find something else to do.
Yeah, like I have no intention of listening to podcasts like indoors. That's weird as fuck. Why would I do? I mean, indoors. Like I mean, I guess at a gym that's fine. But I mean, like I'm definitely not going to sit in like my bed and listen to a podcast, especially because like I don't want to listen to like Chapo at the moment. That'd be too depressing. I don't want to hear them talk about politics now. They'd be way too sad currently.
Yeah, I actually listened. Like I keep up with Chapo still, or at least I try to. The Majority Report. See, with Majority Report, I usually listen on their app, and they've been having issues with their app. So if they're not streaming it on the app, I'm probably not going to listen. So I've been kind of spotty with that recently over the last couple of weeks. And then there's Useful Idiots, and what else? The Discourse, the Brandon Sutton. And I've mostly been just trying to do stuff with my own show and just, try not to die and stuff. Yeah. The new the new In This Moment album. I listened to it recently. I didn't really like it that much. I thought it was good, but I just it's not. I just didn't really like it that much. Um, and there was the new Five Finger Death Punch about a month ago. It was almost a month ago. I liked it. It had to I had to warm up to it a little bit. But I like it quite a bit. And then a new Lady Gaga song dropped a few weeks ago, and I didn't really like it at all. But I'm looking forward to her new album. But yeah, and then Mirror's gonna drop something soon, I heard. So yeah, I'm just kind of waiting around.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but that's pretty much it for now. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, of course.
Where can we find you on social media?
See what my handle is currently. Oh, Aidan Smith 2020. AIDAN. Definitely not AIDEN. Yeah, it's the only one important. Not using Instagram particularly much.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks, man.
Yeah, of course. Take care, dude.
You too.